Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Nazis in the jungle. From 1935 to 1937, the Nazis embarked on an expedition into the jungles of Brazil. Fast forward to just recently, the discovery of a massive cross stuck at the grave site of one of the dead expedition members shocked the international community. The grave marker had a swastika carved into it, proving without a doubt the Nazis had been up to something deep in the dense wilds of Brazil. But what were the Nazis doing in the jungle? That's a question that doesn't have an easy answer. It's true that German research teams went on various academic missions even after the Nazis came into power. However, the Amazon Jerry expedition, as it was called, was criticized for its lack of academic interest. Nobody really knows what the Nazis were doing. Some think they were there on a diplomatic mission. Some believe they were trying to establish a base of operations in South America, while others suggest they were hunting for lost treasure. When the expedition was announced over 80 years ago, the Nazis simply said they were embarking on a journey of scientific desire, whatever that means. The mission itself was a bit of a disaster. One of their planes crashed, many men died trying to navigate the jungle rivers, and those who didn't perish suffered in the wilderness for about a year. They finally returned to Germany in May of 1937 with a collection of animal bones, artifacts, and native tools. But to this day, we still don't know what their mission was. What do you think they were doing? Let me know in the comments. Number 9. Hitler on vacation. Adolf Hitler may have escaped to Germany and lived a long and peaceful life in rural Colombia. At least that's according to information released by the CIA. Recently released documents have shown that the CIA were concerned, or at least interested, in rumors that Adolf Hitler escaped Germany. It's a historical fact that Hitler died in his bunker in April of 1945. Nonetheless, there were trusted reports that Hitler was alive and well, living alongside other Nazi expatriates in 1955. Hitler and his group of cronies had somehow sneaked across the sea and hid themselves in a tropical paradise. Hitler's body may have been identified, but it likely wouldn't have taken much for the deranged German leader to have a fake double created to fool the world. The closest the CIA ever came to finding Hitler was thanks to a report given by a CIA operative under the moniker Similodi 3. The covert operative was shown a photograph by a contact in Colombia showing Hitler standing next to another escaped Nazi officer. The photograph was grainy, black and white, and hardly sufficient evidence, but it did show someone who looked an awful lot like Hitler. The CIA was skeptical though, and so as far as we know, they never did track him down. If Hitler truly did survive the war, it looks like he may have retired in Colombia. And now for number 8, but first I want to give a big shout out to Teddy Vano and Nicola Brown. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. We've got lots more videos like these coming up. Number 8. The Ghost Blimp. At 6 a.m. on August 16, 1942, a Navy blimp took off from Treasure Island, an artificial piece of land constructed in San Francisco Bay. It was a U.S. Navy blimp L-8, manned by a small crew of only 2 men. 5 hours later, the blimp crashed into a suburban neighborhood in Daly City, California. It banged into some rooftops and took down power lines before finally hitting the ground. And yet the 2 crew members were nowhere to be seen. Sometime between the blimp taking off and the blimp descending on Daly City, Ernest DeWitt Cody and Charles Ellis Adams vanished into thin air. Before the debris had even been cleared from the street, the L-8 took on the nickname Ghost Blimp. At the time of the crash, the United States of America had been at war with Japan for 8 months. Everyone was on edge, scared the Japanese were going to start attacking the West Coast. It was assumed that somehow the Japanese had something to do with stealing the blimp's crewmen. But it didn't make any sense. The blimp sailed along the coast of San Francisco, meaning it was witnessed by hundreds of people. The waters were busy with fishermen, there were passing seaplanes, and everyone saw what the blimp was doing. There was no way anyone could have gotten into the blimp or out of the blimp without someone noticing. Then there came the bizarre eyewitness accounts. One woman on horseback said she saw 3 men in the blimp using her binoculars. Another eyewitness said he saw a group of men parachuting out of the blimp. Whatever the case may be, Ernest and Charles have never been found. What do you think happened to them? Number 7. Communist Japan. The atomic bomb falling on Hiroshima may have saved Japan from a brutal Soviet occupation. When the decision was made to drop the nuclear bomb on Japan, it was made to prevent a full-scale invasion of the Japanese islands. If it had come down to that, there would have been millions of casualties. Trying to take Japan on their home turf with foot soldiers would undoubtedly have been the bloodiest battle fought by Americans during the war. To avoid such a confrontation, the bomb was used. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the Soviets had been plotting their own sneaky invasion of Japan. The plan was to take action on August 24, 1945. Soviet bombers would leave their base near Vladivostok, dropping devastating bombs onto the island of Hokkaido. By 5 o'clock that morning, Soviet regiments would be storming the shores, and 2 days later, Hokkaido would be largely in the hands of the Russians. That was the rough battle plan drawn up by Soviet Admiral Ivan Yumashev. The troops were on standby, submarines were ready, and they had already started sinking any Japanese ships they could find. The Soviets already occupied Sakhalin Island nearby and were ready for a full-scale invasion. But when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the Soviets suddenly changed their mind. 2 days before the attack was planned, Stalin canceled the order. Number 6. Glenn Miller's disappearance. Glenn Miller was at the peak of his musical career when World War II broke out. He was making serious cash performing live across the United States. But being the patriot he was, Glenn put his musical career on hold briefly while he traveled to Europe to entertain U.S. troops stationed there. Everything was going just fine until one foggy afternoon on December 15, 1944. Glenn Miller was on his way from England to France when his airplane vanished in a cloud of fog and was never seen again. For a very long time, nobody knew what happened to Glenn. His plane was never found, nor was his body. Some suggested it was friendly fire, and some believe Glenn was involved in espionage and was assassinated by the enemy. The truth was he may have been on a secret mission. He wouldn't have been the only American celebrity who worked as a covert operative during the war. Then again, it may have all come down to a fuel intake issue. According to Dennis Sprague from the Glenn Miller Archive at the University of Colorado, the plane crashed into the English Channel because its fuel intakes froze. Dennis says Glenn got on board a UC-64A Norseman, but as the plane crossed the English Channel, its fuel lines froze and the engine gave out. Dennis says the reason the plane was never found was because it most likely shattered on impact, breaking into a million pieces and killing everyone on board. How could Dennis possibly know all this? He cites military documents, specifically U.S. Army Air Force records. These records supposedly discuss engine ice problems that were never shared with the general public. Number 5. Imperial Russia. The Soviets were not the only ones with their own secret battle plans. While Russia was secretly plotting to take over Japan, Japan was secretly plotting to take over Russia. This was a true world war in every sense, with so many countries trying to backstab their neighbors. The Japanese had something called Operation Kantokuen. It was created by the General Staff of the Imperial Japanese Army to invade Siberia. Only their plan was made in the early days of the war. After the Soviets and Germans started fighting in June of 1941, Japan had the perfect opportunity to invade Siberia. Their plot was to send 7 Japanese armies and a huge part of their navy and air forces into the Russian Far East. The plan was even approved by Emperor Hirohito on July 7, 1941. They might have gone through with it if they hadn't started war with America. U.S. sanctions were beginning to cripple the Japanese economically, and the massive effort it would have taken to invade Russia didn't seem worth it. Japan had to focus their energy on fighting the U.S. in the Pacific. Number 4. Bouncing bombs. On May 16, 1943, Commander Guy Gibson led a British bombing raid to destroy a series of dams in Germany's industrial heartland. This was Operation Chastise, and it employed for the first time a new secret weapon called the bouncing bomb. The dams targeted were heavily defended. These were extremely important for the industrial production to continue running in Germany, and so they pulled out all the stops to keep the British from blowing up their dams. There were torpedo nets in the water to stop attacks from below. There were also anti-aircraft guns to defend against bombers. But British scientists were way ahead of the curve. They had been developing a weapon for the past 5 years that could destroy the bombs from a distance. British engineer Barnes Wallis and his team of scientists developed a bomb that could skip across water like a rubber ball, bouncing across a basketball court. The bombing was a fantastic success and also a huge failure. The bombs worked by skipping across the water exactly the way they were designed to. However, only one of the dams collapsed. Out of the 133 men who took part in the raid, 53 were killed. On the ground, 1,300 Germans were killed when the dam burst. It was a success for the bouncing bomb, though the dent in Germany's industry was negligible. Number 3. The Tula Society. The Tula Society was the Illuminati of the early 20th century. It was a secret society founded in the German city of Munich in 1918 by a man named Adam Glauer. We know very little about the inside workings of the cult, other than that they were a racist organization with hardcore anti-Semitic ideals. But this wasn't just a group of hateful men. They were also obsessed with the occult and the paranormal. This was an extremely secretive society, so we don't know anything that happened inside their meetings. All we know is that the society included members such as Adolf Hitler, Dietrich Eckart, and others who would later become top brass in the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Many members of the Tula Society were founding members of the Nazi Party. The Tula Society was officially disbanded and dissolved in 1937, but that was only because the members of the occult organization had just become the ruling party of Germany. To put things as simply as possible, the Nazis may have originated from a group of cultists who believed in some exceptionally strange ideas involving supernatural forces of the world. Number 2. The Nazi tunnels on Guernsey. There are some secret underground tunnels carved by the Nazis during World War II that recently went up for sale. They aren't that secret anymore, considering they were just listed as real estate, but a lot of people don't know the story behind them. The tunnels were constructed by German forces during their brief occupation of the Channel Islands. The Germans never managed to take a single piece of Great Britain except for the Channel Islands, and Hitler was obsessed with holding on to this small piece of the pie. To keep the soldiers safe from the inevitable bombing raids, the Nazis dug tunnels like a bunch of mole rats. They continued digging from 1941 until the islands were liberated in 1945. After the war was over, most people forgot about the tunnels. Many of them were overgrown or simply ignored by the locals. But in this booming real estate market, the tunnels now have some worth. One series of secret passages dug in 1942, descending 80 feet deep, just went up for sale for around $200,000. These tunnels were abandoned and forgotten until the 1980s, discovered by a man digging a hole in his garden. The hole was exceptionally deep, so deep that Derek Turnbull was able to put a ladder down and crawl inside. He was shocked to find 1,200 feet of tunnels. Derek and his wife Maureen spent the next 5 years clearing them out, then opened the place as a museum. Now, the tunnels are up for sale. Any takers? Number 1. The Antigravity Machine. One of the greatest secret military projects may have been conducted by the Nazis in an attempt to build an anti-gravity machine. The device was called Die Glock, or the bell in English. Even though the Nazis lost the war on all fronts, they somehow emerged with a reputation for devising high-tech weaponry. And sure, they did develop the first cruise missiles and superior tanks, but could they really have devised a machine to control gravity itself? Rumors of the device began circulating in the 1960s. It was said an SS operation in charge of researching anti-gravity was the one responsible for creating the machine. Colonel Hans Kammler was the genius behind its creation. but it wasn't quite ready by the time the war ended. And so, when the US showed up, Kabler gave them the technology in exchange for his freedom. The only thing that's verified from this story is that Heinz Kabler vanished in the final days of World War II and was never seen again. He may have been captured by the US as part of Project Paperclip. He may have died in the fighting. We just don't know. As far as legends are concerned, the US finally developed an anti-gravity spaceship, but it crashed outside the small town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in December of 1965. Do you think there's an anti-gravity machine floating around out there? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and come back soon. Bye!